So I assume he comes to Stamford, comes to the office, comes to the tower. You guys sit down, and Vince says, okay, I want to make you a plumber. Is that the pitch?
No, not really. Actually, he sent me down to Tampa to meet with Dusty along with Bobby Heenan and explain the whole idea. And Vince had talked to Dusty ahead of time and kind of explained the idea in grandiose terms.
Right.
But when Bobby and I went down to meet with Dusty, we met him in the old Florida Championship Wrestling offices.
Oh, wow.
And we went in. I explained to him the vignettes that we had and what we were going to shoot over the next couple days. We did the pizza one, we did the plumber man, and I think we did a total of 3 in Tampa, and then we did the rest of them up in Connecticut. But we laid it out, and it was an interesting meeting. Let me put it that way. Dream was kind of looking at us like he used to do, kind of out of the side of his eyeball, if you will. And I think Dusty might have thought it was a rib.
So what you're saying is Dusty didn't really trust that this was on the up and up, or he thought maybe you guys were going to bury him, or he just wasn't trusting of the situation. Is that fair to say?
I think he might have thought that we were yanking his chain a little bit there. And so, lo and behold, Vince comes down the next day to shoot the vignettes with us, and Vince and Dusty had a heart-to-heart talk, walking around Bobby Heenan's neighborhood, and decision was made. This is what we're going to do, and let's go have some fun with it. And we shot the vignettes. We shot the plumber first, and then we shot the pizza man, and like I said, I think we shot one other one down there that I don't really remember. But those, again, to talk about, we did it as a rib. We never looked at anything as, hey, let's do this as a rib. Won't this be a great joke? And let's spend all of this money and invest all of this time and energy on a television product because it's a rib. No, we really looked at it as we think this is going to draw.
Okay. Now, for those of you paying attention at home, at this time, there is a character on WWF TV named the $1 Million Man. And what is the $1 Million Man's servant named?
Virgil.
And you're going to tell me that he had no reason to believe that anything you're saying was a rib?
It wasn't necessarily a rib, the Virgil deal. It was just
a rib.
What if?
Oh my gosh! Listen to you spin.
It's a name. It's a name that came up. It's a name that fit, and it worked at the time. And at the time, Dusty was in charge of Crockett in the NWA in the Mid-Atlantic territory. And, it might have been suggested as a dig on Dusty, but at the same time, it worked. It fit.
Now, who may or may not have made that suggestion to name the manservant Virgil?
Wow, I really don't recall. I think it was Joel Watts, but I can't say for sure.
All right, so now I'm curious, and this is the wrestling nerd in me. When you're shooting stuff like this in Tampa, are you using a local television crew, or do you fly people down from New York? Do you get permits to go shoot all this? Or are you just doing this guerrilla style? How are these type of old school vignettes done? Because I think any classic WWF, memory has to include the way these characters were introduced through that series of vignettes. How did that come about?
Well, back in the day, it was easier to ask forgiveness than permission. So most of the time, if you're asking me how I did them, a lot of times I would just shoot first and let them ask questions later. But I always had my own crews. Kerwin Silfies, who's the director of the television show, Kerwin used to come down and help direct. But it was all of our own people. It was our own crew and guys that we worked with every week.
So when you and Bobby go down to have this conversation, is the crew already there, or do you fly them down the next day, or what's the plan for that? Like when he says, "Okay, let's do it, baby," or "That's a terrible Dusty."
Well, the crew had come in that day or that evening to shoot the next day.
So it wasn't a question of is he going to go for it. It's a matter of this is what we're doing. We're not here to really sell it.
Yeah, no, this is what we're doing. We were there to shoot vignettes. We were there to get this thing kicked off.
So when you're meeting with him, is there anybody else in the meeting, or is it just Bobby, Bruce, and Dusty?
That meeting was just Bobby, Bruce, and Dusty.
Okay. So after everybody kind of agrees and says, hey, this is what we're going to go do, is Dusty living in Florida? Does everybody kind of go their separate ways and we just say, meet you under the sink tomorrow? Or what's the plan?
Basically, yeah. It's we went back to my hotel, Bobby and I did, and of course Bobby lived there, but Vince wanted to know how the meeting went. There weren't cell phones at that time, so you had to go back and get on a phone in a hotel and talk about it. And he decided to come on down to make sure there was no interpretations or confusion on interpretation with the dream, so that Dusty understood that this was coming from Vince, and this is how Vince envisioned this character. And when they talked, everybody was on board, and Dusty loved it, and I thought he did a great job. I thought he jumped in with both feet. I thought that he did a hell of a job. You know, we had fun with it, and that's what it was supposed to be. They were supposed to be fun, lighthearted, and to introduce him not as this ass kicker that he, I think, envisioned himself as, that he had always been positioned as the top babyface ass kicker. It was more of an attraction-based deal. That, you know, American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and he's a common man. Everybody can relate to him, and let's introduce him that way. You got to remember, too, to the WWF audience, especially then, who only saw the superstars of wrestling on Saturday mornings, and they didn't know who Dusty Rhodes was.
Yep.
So this was a new character to them. To the traditional fan, they did know who Dusty was, and they got it. But, you know, no, it wasn't a rib. It was something to enhance his character and introduce him to a whole new fan base.